Arthur is a tyrannical king who rules over the world with an iron fist. During his ascent to the throne, Arthur slaughtered his enemies, nuked cities, and committed countless atrocities, all in the name of power. But one day, he reflects on all the things he has done, he is overcome with a sense of guilt, and in the next moment, he dies of a heart attack. As he is slowly descending into the abyss, a voice calls out to him and says it will give him a second chance at life, so he had better not mess it up this time. A few moments later, Arthur opens his eyes and finds two people looking down at him. The man says his name is Reynolds, and he is Arthur's father, while Alice over here is his mother. They don't really expect their newborn baby to understand what they are saying, but they are so excited to have him. Arthur slowly comes to the realization that these people really are his parents, and he was just born a minute ago. He is still finding it hard to believe that he is a baby again, but he can't deny that his parents are really good at taking care of him. Overall, he is pretty happy, but he still doesn't like the fact that he is stuck in a baby body. He's got an oversized head, he can't speak, and every couple of hours he shits his diaper involuntarily, so he has lost all control. But then he notices something that is even stranger than his current circumstance. He watches as Reynolds channels energy into his fists, and proceeds to smash a boulder to pieces. Arthur is amazed because this is a power that he knows nothing about despite all of his years as the ruler of the world. This feat is apparently quite impressive. So Reynolds is proud of himself and turns to his family so they can praise him, but he fails to pay attention to his surroundings, so a rock falls straight into his head. Alice was worried something like this might happen. So she then goes over to him and starts using magic to heal Reynolds' injury, but she warns him to be more careful next time he wants to show off. Reynolds may have just been trying to show off, but when he gets serious, those fists are no joke because he can easily one-shot a wild boar when he goes out hunting. And having him around makes things a lot easier for his party members. By the time the hunting trip is over, Reynolds returns to his family, and is ready for a welcome back hug. But then he remembers that he is still covered in boar blood, so he's going to have to get cleaned up first. Arthur has learned two things from seeing this. 1. This world is so dangerous that it is common for people to own weapons for their protection. And 2. He's going to have to learn how to fight if he wants to live freely in this world. Now that Reynolds is back, Alice says it's time to put Arthur down for a nap, and normally he'd be upset about being treated like a baby, but this is one part he actually enjoys. Back in his previous life, he rarely ever got the chance to sleep peacefully because people would always try to assassinate him when he least expected it. Of course, he could easily defeat any attackers that came after him, but it was incredibly stressful. Months pass, and Arthur's baby limbs are finally strong enough to allow him to move around on his own now. The first thing he does with his new mobility is go over to a mirror so he can take a long, hard look at himself. His parents think it's cute that Arthur is so mesmerized by his reflection, but he is just coming to terms with the fact that he really is a baby. Anyway, since Arthur can move on his own now, when Alice puts him down for a nap later that day, he sets his plan into motion. As soon as she leaves the room, he opens his eyes and throws his blanket out of the crib so he can climb down and escape his crib. He then proceeds to crawl across the floor while Alice is busy doing the dishes, and she must be really focused on those dishes because Arthur makes it all the way to the other side of the room without her noticing. Once he gets there, he opens the door to the house's library and pulls out a book because he needs to learn more about this world. After reading one of the books, he learns that this continent is called Dicathan, and it is divided into 3 kingdoms. The Darv Kingdom, a nation of dwarves that live in vast cave cities. The Elamor Kingdom, a nation of elves who live deep within the forest, and the Sapin Kingdom, a kingdom of humans ruled by a king, although here no one ever nuked the cities to take over. Arthur still wants to learn more, so he pulls out another book, and it gives him some much-needed answers. Arthur had noticed that the level of technology in this world is lacking, and the reason for that is the presence of magic. People are able to use magic by manipulating the mana within their bodies, and while it's not exactly common, magic is a huge part of life in this world. People can use magic in 2 ways, namely augmentation and conjuring. Augmentation involves circulating mana within your body, granting the user incredible strength, defense, and agility, while conjurers can project their mana outwards and use it to control any phenomenon they desire. That pretty much sums up the info about this world's magic system, but Arthur doesn't find anything about the healing magic Alice used earlier, so he assumes she must be an exception of some sort. From what Arthur can tell, most people manifest their mana when they hit puberty, and by channeling that mana through something called the mana core, one can learn to control it and become a mage. This is easy for Arthur to understand because in his previous life, he rose to power thanks to the innate power of ki within him. It functioned the exact same way as mana, so he tries focusing all of his energy to see if he can generate a reaction, and sure enough, his mana core begins to develop. This is a huge step forward in Arthur's development. Before he can do any more training, Alice finally finds him. She's been worried sick ever since she found out he wasn't in his crib, so she's glad he wasn't hurt. But while she's holding him up, she notices that something is different about him. Arthur is she might have sensed the mana within him, but she actually just noticed that Arthur pooped himself again. 2 years go by, and Alice is writing in her journal one day. She is so grateful that Arthur is growing up strong and healthy, But she's starting to grow a little concerned because she hasn't seen Arthur smile even once since he was born. Just then, she notices Reynolds and Arthur outside, and it looks like Reynolds is giving Arthur some sword lessons. Arthur seems pretty interested, but Alice is furious that Reynolds would let a 2-year-old swing a dangerous stick around. By now, Arthur has realized that Alice isn't someone you want to get angry, so he's going to have to be careful not to make her mad. To avoid any other dangerous activities, Alice decides to take Arthur out for the day to show him around the town, and Arthur is particularly excited about this because it will give him a chance to gather valuable first-hand information about this world. He can discern the level of this nation's technology by looking at the weapons that are sold to the general public, and he also gets to see various substances that he has never encountered before. Best of all, he got to witness a mage casting fire magic up close, so overall, today's trip proved to be incredibly valuable for him. By the end of the day, Arthur's baby body is exhausted from all the activity, so he is struggling to stay awake, and Alice wants to put him down for a nap as soon as they get home. As limiting as this new life has been, Arthur has come to enjoy life with loving parents. In his past life, Arthur got dropped off at spawn with no starter kit, so he was forced to live his childhood in an orphanage, and never got to experience parental love, so this is a nice change of pace for him. Arthur soon falls asleep on Alice's shoulder, so she starts carrying him to his crib, and along the way, she tells him how proud she is of him for learning so much. She has noticed all the times he sneaks out of his bed to read books, and she saw how excited he was to see the outside world, so she is sure he has an adventurous spirit. She assumes he must have gotten that from Reynolds, and sooner or later, Arthur is bound to want to leave home to see the world on his own. Personally, she would prefer it if Arthur lived a peaceful life here, but as long as he is happy, she will support him no matter what. The next day, Arthur is standing by the window and watches as Reynolds begins practicing in the front yard. He is interested in seeing the applications of magic up close and personal again, so he eagerly watches as Reynolds begins circulating mana within his body. Eventually, rocks begin to fly up from the ground, and Reynolds makes it seem like it is the greatest thing in the world, but in reality, it is pretty pitiful. This is the limit of Reynolds' skill when it comes to conjuring, but that's because Reynolds' specialty is augmentation, so his magic is much more efficient when he sticks to using it within his body. Seeing his father's power motivates Arthur to go do some training, but just when he's about to climb down from the table, Alice tells him it's time for his nap. Arthur still can't speak yet, so he starts whining as they pass the bookshelf, but Alice tells him he needs to take a nap, so there's no time for books right now. Normally, there would be nothing Arthur could do about this, but he recently learned a legendary technique, pouting. Arthur has mastered the art of weaponizing his cuteness as a baby, so even though Alice still wants to put him down for a nap, she eventually relents, and just lets him read his book. Once Arthur is alone, he begins practicing with his mana core, and over the past 2 years, he has managed to get pretty good at it. By gathering various fragments of mana within his body, he was able to generate a mana core within himself, and although it was incredibly strenuous, it was well worth it. Now, with just a little more effort, he should be able to cast his first spell, but Arthur drastically underestimates the strength of his mana and accidentally blows up the house. Alice and Reynolds were outside when the explosion happened, and it was so huge that Reynolds' back gets burnt up really bad, but he and Alice are otherwise alright. However, they soon realize that Arthur was still in the house when it blew up, so they rush inside to check if he's still alive. There's no way a baby could have survived an explosion of that magnitude, but when Reynolds reaches the library, he is shocked to find that not only is Arthur completely unharmed, he was also the source of the explosion. He is barely 3 years old, so it shouldn't have been possible for him to use magic until he was at least 12, yet Arthur is already practically a master of mana. He stands proudly and looks at his parents. But he forgets that the house is falling apart, so when 2 roof beams fall straight towards him, he is completely caught off guard. He tries running away, but his stubby baby legs fail him, so it looks like he's done for. Fortunately, both Alice and Reynolds rush in to save him, and while Alice shields him with her body, Reynolds uses his magic to block all of the debris and save them both. Arthur is a bit shocked since this is the first time anyone has ever risked their life to save him, but Alice is so relieved that he is alright that she starts crying. Arthur still isn't used to having people care about him like this, so seeing her cry makes him cry as well. He never could have done something like this in his old life because he was expected to be a ruthless king. At one point, a man tried to assassinate Arthur, so after he was caught, the entire council assembled and prepared to sentence him for his crimes. And on top of that, they plan to ship the man's wife and son off to a camp that has never heard of the Geneva Convention, so they are doomed to be tortured and experimented on, because why not? The man begins to beg Arthur to spare his family because they don't deserve to suffer for what he did. And as an act of mercy, Arthur decided to kill him on the spot. That was basically an average Monday for him back then, but now he spends his Monday training with his father. Reynolds wants Arthur to try practicing with gauntlets, but Arthur already has a lifetime of sword experience, so he's not switching his main weapon. Since Arthur is so insistent on using a sword, Reynolds decides to use one as well, and to make things a little more interesting, he's going to reinforce his sword with mana. However, to his utter shock, Arthur does the exact same thing and cuts through Reynolds' sword with ease. After seeing this, Reynolds realized that Arthur is way too talented for him to train, so he is thinking of getting a professional teacher for him, and goes inside to talk to Alice about it. Alice flat out says no to the idea because she can't stand the thought of sending Arthur to some random town just so he can learn. They had already talked about this, and Reynold was supposed to teach Arthur to fight while she would teach him about magic. But Reynold points out that Arthur managed to cut right through his sword during practice even though it was infused with mana, and the kid is still a toddler for God's sake. If he's doing stuff like this at such a young age, then who knows what he could be capable of in the future, so Reynold thinks it's important for him to have a proper teacher. Alice can't deny that Arthur is unnaturally talented, but she still hates the idea of leaving him alone at a school in the city, so she and Reynold start arguing over it for a few minutes because they can't come to an agreement. Arthur is getting sick of all the arguing, so he points out that they can just come with him to the city, that way he can still get a teacher, and his parents won't have to leave him alone. The two of them hadn't realized that was an option, but it solves all their problems, so they think it's a great idea. So they immediately start making preparations for the journey, and the next day, a carriage arrives to take them to the city. They will be traveling with some of their old friends, and Arthur recognizes them because they are the ones who helped Alice and Reynold rebuild the house after he blew it up. They are all in a party called Twin Horns, and the leader, Adam, introduces himself to Arthur. Angela introduces herself as well while simultaneously introducing Arthur to her chest and nearly choking him out, and Alice is happily watching it happen. Luckily, before Arthur passes out, Durden gets him away from Angela and introduces himself as well, but he is a bit more gentle and just gives Arthur a high five. Arthur then notices a girl standing on top of the carriage, and you know she's trying to or a farm because there's no reason to be standing on the carriage right now. She doesn't say anything, so the others tell Arthur that her name is Jasmine, and the final member of the team is Helen, the archer. Since the introductions are finally done, the group needs to get moving, so they all climb into the carts and head out. Along the way, Alice asks Arthur if he is excited about his first big trip, and Arthur says yes, but internally he is thinking about how primitive this world is. They still use horse-drawn carriages to travel here, while in Arthur's old world, he had an entire fleet of flying cars he could use at any time. After traveling for most of the day, the group decides to take a break for lunch, so they set up camp, but as soon as they stop, they are attacked by wolves. Although these wolves are pretty dumb, because they didn't even try to surround the group, they just charged straight in and got bodies by the team of adventurers in an instant. Arthur finds the whole display interesting since this is the first time he has seen real combat in this world, and he intends to become strong enough to handle threats like that on his own soon. Since they got a lot of dead wolf meat now, the group decides to cook it for dinner tonight, but they got no spices, so it's just going to be plain grilled meat. Just then, Alice notices that Reynolds' arm is slightly injured, so she offers to heal it for him, but before she does, Jasmine tells her to wait a moment. All the others gather around Alice to keep a lookout because healers like her are incredibly rare in this world, so if someone were to see her using healing magic, then she could end up being targeted for it. Once Alice is done healing Reynolds, everyone goes back to what they were doing before, but Adam decides he wants to get a little exercise before he goes to bed, and there's no better way to do that than by fighting a 4-year-old. Seems like a jerk move, but Adam has heard about how strong Arthur is, and he just wants to see for himself, so this is just a practice match. Adam tells Arthur to get ready, and he has already imbued his spear with mana, so Arthur does the same. As the match begins, Arthur channels some magic into his feet, so just as he is about to clash with Adam, he vanishes and reappears behind him. This would have been the perfect chance for Arthur to strike, but his stubby toddler feet slip on the ground, so he loses his footing and Adam gets a chance to recover. Arthur and Adam then begin clashing, but I'm pretty sure the animation budget must have had negative values. Anyway, Arthur gets knocked back since his toddler body is too light to keep up with a seasoned adventurer, so he gets knocked into the air. Luckily, the others save him before he hits the ground, and they all start yelling at Adam for nearly hurting Arthur, but Adam says he couldn't help it because Arthur was too strong for him to hold back. There's no way a toddler should be capable of such strength, so he thinks Reynolds must have been giving him some kind of super soldier training, but in reality, he never actually taught Arthur to do any of this stuff, he just learned it on his own. Just then, Jasmine walks up to Arthur and startles him by accident. She was really impressed by Arthur's fight, so she asks him to teach her how to do that thing with the magic in his feet. Arthur was hoping to keep his technique secret, since it is something he mastered in his past life, but she's not taking no for an answer, and from the look in her eyes she's going to pester him relentlessly until he caves, so he may have to teach her eventually. The next morning, the journey continues as planned, and along the way, they take a few breaks to relax. During these breaks, Adam gives Arthur a few basic spearman lessons, and Helen teaches him how to use a bow a few minutes after that. And with a few basic lessons, he is able to figure it out pretty quickly. The only weapon knowledge Arthur has from his past life is with a sword, so these lessons are really valuable to him. And since he is learning so much from them, he decides to teach Jasmine his technique after all. By channeling magic into your feet and using wind magic at the same time, you are able to boost your speed tremendously. And after demonstrating it once, Jasmine is able to replicate it perfectly. Later on, Arthur is reading a magic book in the carriage, but for some reason, Jasmine is sitting there too and just staring at him. And it's not a coincidence either because she keeps taking every chance she can get to get close to Arthur. The next morning, Jasmine gives Arthur a knife as thanks for teaching her that technique, and it's clear that she really likes Arthur since she usually doesn't interact with people intentionally. A few minutes later, everyone gets back into the carriages, and they continue through the journey. But as Arthur is reading his book, the carriage is suddenly attacked by bandits. They are being attacked by bandits, and the carriage is completely surrounded, so there's nowhere for them to go. The bandit leader orders his men to capture the women and children so they can be sold as slaves, so all the bandits rush in, and the adventurers do their best to hold them off. In terms of raw power, the twin horns and Reynold are much stronger than the individual bandits, but there are way too many for them to defeat on their own, so sooner or later they are going to get overwhelmed. At one point, Reynold gets launched into the carriage by the hurt, so Alice wants to come to heal him. However, Reynold tells her to stay away, because if the bandits find out about her power, they will start targeting her, so instead, he asks Arthur to take Alice and run as far away as he can. Arthur doesn't want to leave Reynold behind, but Reynold tells him that Alice is pregnant with another child, so protecting her should be a top priority. Arthur understands when Reynold gives the signal, he prepares his magic to flee with Alice, and in the meantime, Reynold says he holds the bandits off. The bandit leader orders his men to go after Arthur and Alice, but Reynold refuses to let that happen, so he charges in and clashes with him. The bandit leader managed to knock Reynold down before, but this time, Reynold's family is on the line, so he's not going down easily. While Reynold is keeping the bandit leader busy, a few of the more insignificant bandits try to go after Arthur and Alice instead, but Adam and Jasmine throw some daggers at them and take them out to clear a path for Arthur to escape with Alice. They are all doing their best to keep the bandits away from Arthur, and he is doing his best to get Alice to safety. It's honestly ironic how he spent his previous life taking things with no regard for others, and now he is forced to run away in order to avoid losing someone precious to him. After running away for several minutes, Arthur thinks they should be far enough from the bandits to be safe now, but he was wrong. One bandit is watching them from atop a cliff, and this one is capable of using magic, so he attacks Arthur and Alice with the wind spell. Arthur doesn't notice him at first, and by the time he does, the spell has already been cast, so the only thing Arthur can do is push Alice out of the way and take the hit alone. The wind blast knocks Arthur back, so he is going to fall off the cliff, and with his toddler body, that's basically a death sentence. However, if he's going to die, he's not going out alone, so as he is falling off the cliff, he takes the knife he got from Jasmine and throws it at the magic bandit. The knife hits the bandit, and the string wraps around his ankle, so Arthur is able to use it to pull the guy down with him. The adventurers tried to use their magic to save Arthur, but he has already fallen too far for them to reach him, so Arthur is doomed. As he falls to his inevitable death, Arthur looks back on his life, and even though he is going to die, he is filled with a strange sense of peace because he knows he managed to protect his precious family. He finally understands why that man in his past life was so desperate to protect his family. Arthur didn't even think twice about sacrificing himself to save Alice, and while he doesn't regret his actions at all, he still wishes he could have survived to live with them a little longer.